Okay, so you've been saving money for a while now, maybe a few months, maybe a few years, and you look at your account and think, this is taking forever. At this rate, I'm never going to build real wealth. You do the math, you're saving $500 a month, that's $6,000 a year. To reach $100,000, you'd need, what, almost 17 years. That can't be right, surely there's something you're missing. Here's the thing, you are missing something, but it's not what you think. Charlie Munger, who helped build Berkshire Hathaway alongside Warren Buffett, once said the first $100,000 is the hardest. He actually called it something a bit more colorful, but I'll keep this family friendly. The point is, one of the most successful investors in history acknowledged that reaching that first six-figure milestone is brutal. And yet, almost nobody explains what actually happens during that journey. Nobody breaks down the specific phases you go through, why each one feels different, and most importantly, why understanding these phases can shave years off your timeline. My name is Tom, and I spend way too much time thinking about the psychology of wealth building milestones. If you're someone who's trying to build savings but feels like the progress is painfully slow, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Today, I'm breaking down the 5 distinct phases of going from $0 to $100,000. These are the phases nobody talks about because most financial advice just tells you to save more and spend less. Which, yeah, thanks, very helpful. But understanding why each phase feels different and what's actually happening mathematically will change how you approach this entire journey. Before we get into the phases, let me share some statistics that might surprise you. According to data from the Federal Reserve, almost 80% of Americans have saved less than $100,000. And here's the part that should make you pay attention: about 58% have less than $10,000 in retirement savings. So if you're working toward this goal, you're already thinking differently than most people. That matters more than you realize. Now, you might be thinking, Tom, just tell me how long this is going to take so I can prepare myself. Look, it depends on how much you can save and invest, but here's the math that changed my perspective. If you invest $650 per month at a 7% average return, it takes about 9.5 years to reach $100,000. But here's what most people don't realize: once you cross that threshold, it only takes about 5 more years to reach $200,000. Same savings rate, almost half the time. That's the magic we're building toward. But first, you have to survive the 5 phases. Phase 1 is what I call the motivation phase. This is $0 to $1,000. This might sound small, but this phase is actually critical. According to Bankrate's 2026 Emergency Savings Report, only 30% of Americans could cover a $1,000 emergency expense using savings, which means crossing this threshold puts you ahead of 70% of the country. The psychology here is important. Your brain needs early wins to build momentum. Saving your first $1,000 proves to yourself that you can do this. It's not about the amount, it's about the identity shift. Here's what you do in this phase: automate everything. Set up an automatic transfer the day you get paid, even if it's just $50 or $100. Research shows that automatic savings plans lead to people saving roughly twice as much over 5 years compared to manual saving. Don't try to be a hero in this phase. The goal is simply to prove to yourself that saving is possible. Phase 2 is the discipline phase. This is $1,000 to $10,000. This is where it gets hard. And honestly, this is where most people quit. The excitement from phase 1 wears off. You're saving month after month, and the number just isn't moving fast enough. Your friends are buying new cars, going on vacations, upgrading their apartments, and you're sitting there with your $4,000, wondering if this is even worth it. This is where it gets really interesting from a psychological standpoint. There's a phenomenon called lifestyle creep, where your spending increases at the same rate as your income. So people get raises and promotions, but their savings never improve because their expenses grow proportionally. The discipline phase is about breaking that cycle. It's about maintaining your savings rate even when your income increases. If you get a $5,000 raise, at least half of that should go directly to savings before you ever see it in your checking account. The math in this phase is brutal because compound interest barely exists yet. On $5,000 at 7%, you're earning maybe $350 a year in returns. That's less than $30 a month. Your contributions are doing 90% of the work. But you have to push through, because phase 3 is where things start to shift. Phase 3 is the momentum phase. $10,000 to $25,000. Something psychological changes when you cross into 5 figures. It's no longer just savings. It starts to feel like actual wealth, if it's modest. Now, you might be thinking, $10,000 isn't that much. And you're right, it's not. But it's enough to make compound interest visible. At $15,000 earning 7%, you're making over $1,000 per year in returns. That's basically a free month of savings just for having money invested. This is also the phase where you need to start being intentional about where your money is. If it's sitting in a regular savings account earning 0.5%, you're losing ground to inflation. Move it to a high-yield savings account or, better yet, start investing in low-cost index funds. The momentum phase is where you build the habits that will carry you through the harder phases ahead. Track your net worth monthly, celebrate the milestones, and start projecting forward. Use a compound interest calculator to see what your current savings rate will produce in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. That future number will motivate you more than anything else. Phase 4 is the grind phase. $25,000 to $50,000. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This phase is long. This is where most people plateau because life happens. Cars break down, medical bills show up, job changes happen, and suddenly that savings account becomes an emergency fund that actually gets used for emergencies. Here's what most people don't realize about this phase: the setbacks are normal. They're part of the process. The goal isn't to have a perfect, linear path to $50,000. The goal is to keep going despite the interruptions. The math is starting to work in your favor now, though. At $40,000 earning 7%, you're generating $2,800 per year in returns. That's $233 per month. Your money is now contributing almost as much as an extra car payment toward your savings. The psychological trick in this phase is to separate your emergency fund from your investment account. Keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash for actual emergencies. Everything above that should be invested where it can grow. This way, when life happens, you're pulling from the emergency fund, not your investment account. Your compound interest machine stays intact. Phase 5 is the acceleration phase. $50,000 to $100,000. This is where everything changes. And I mean everything. At $50,000 invested at 7%, you're earning $3,500 per year in returns. That's nearly $300 per month. If you're also contributing $500 per month, your portfolio is now growing by $800 per month, but you're only putting in $500 of that. Your money is finally doing more work than you are. The timeline starts compressing. Remember that math I mentioned earlier? If it took you 7 to 8 years to save your first $50,000, this next $50,000 will take significantly less time. Maybe 4 to 5 years. Same savings rate, faster results. This is also where you need to watch out for a different kind of psychological trap: complacency. You've built something real. You can see the finish line. And there's a temptation to ease up, to reward yourself, to slow down the contributions because you're almost there. Don't. This is the worst possible time to slow down because the acceleration is just beginning. Here's a stat that should blow your mind according to analysis from 4-Pillar Freedom. If you save $10,000 per year at 7%, it takes 7.84 years to go from $0 to $100,000. But it only takes 6.37 years to go from $600,000 to $1 million. The same amount of money, but your savings is so much momentum that it takes less time to add $400,000 than it originally took to add $100,000. That's the power you're building toward. But it only works if you don't stop at $100,000. So here's the bigger picture that ties all 5 phases together. The first $100,000 is hard because you're doing 75% of the work. Compound interest contributes maybe 25% during this phase. But once you cross that threshold, the ratios start flipping. By the time you hit $500,000, your money is doing most of the heavy lifting. You're just feeding the machine. The journey from $0 to $100,000 is really about building the habits, the discipline, and the psychological resilience to handle wealth. Because here's a truth nobody talks about: most people who suddenly come into large sums of money, through inheritance, lottery, whatever, lose it within a few years. They didn't go through these 5 phases. They didn't develop the relationship with money that this journey creates. By going through this process, you're not just building a number, you're building the skills to keep that number and grow it for the rest of your life. So here's what I want you to do right now. Figure out which phase you're in. Be honest with yourself. Then focus only on the challenges specific to that phase. If you're in phase 2, don't stress about investment strategies. Focus on discipline and automation. If you're in phase 4, separate your emergency fund from your investments. Each phase has its own battle. Fight the battle you're in, not the one that's 3 phases away. If this breakdown helped you see your financial journey differently, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. I release new videos every week on the psychology and mathematics of building wealth. And if you want to tell me which phase you're currently in, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.